Hey, 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 beautiful bosses. It's your girl, Nicole Doss, and I am super excited to be back with another episode of Prestige Radio with your girl. How are you fabulous bosses doing this week? I hope you are having a wonderful day thus far. So we're just going to get right on into it. We are going to talk about She Writes. That's right. I'm going to help you write and publish your story. I'm not going to keep you long today, but I definitely want to take you step by step on my process, what I have done, because I'm telling you, a lot of you have been through so much in your lives, whether it's around what you've been through personally, or whether it's been regarding what you have been through in just growing your business. If you are a subject matter expert in your industry, and you are interested in sharing your said knowledge with your tribe, these are all reasons why you should sit down and really put pen to paper and to write your story. I came up with She Writes as a movement to really focus on helping women not just figure out how can they write their stories, but to do it without exploiting them. Doing it without charging them thousands of dollars for them to figure out how do I get my voice to be heard. And so when I created She Writes, I really wanted it to stand for strong, heroic, and empowered because of the stories that a lot of my clients ended up saying or sharing with me that they wanted to really push to market or push out to their tribes. There were stories that really had the ability to ignite fire in other people, to empower them to find hope. There were just so many awesome stories I've found on this path of really offering this workshop to all. So as listeners of this podcast, if there's a story in your heart and you know that you want to be a self-published author, then today's episode is all about how do we get you there. All right. So let's just jump right into it. So what we're going to talk about really are steps to writing your story, what happens after you are complete with your manuscript, the best ways for you to think about selling it, and then we're going to talk about selling beyond e-commerce. So now that you are a published author, what are some things that you should really be thinking about? So, excuse me, I'm like knocking everything over. So when you think about yourself, and it depends, ask yourself, is this going to be a fiction story or is this going to be a nonfiction story? Good examples of nonfiction would be self-help books, empowerment books, books that are based on a how-to model that you may have created. So maybe you are a financial planner or a financial coach, and there's a certain model that you've created to help people save money or to save money to be able to start with investing money. And if that's the case, then you're in a space where you would then definitely write a nonfiction book. If you want to teach people how to increase sales, increase marketing, definitely nonfiction. If you've been through a very traumatizing thing in your life and you have come out of it triumphantly, but yet you want to change the names to protect the innocent, you may want to go with a fiction book. A lot of women do share that they have very traumatic experiences, and where they are now in their lives, maybe it may hurt them. So maybe even that, you don't just write a fiction book, but you write a fiction book under a pseudonym, a pen name, if you will, of what that author name, will be. Think about that and really think about whatever you share. It's on the shelves forever, right? Even if you discontinue a book, someone has this written manuscript. So you want to be very mindful of what you put out there and how it can affect you. So definitely, especially when we talk about beyond the manuscript or beyond e-commerce, you definitely want to be mindful of the stories that you put out there. So really take your time to think about, whether or not you want to go into a fiction space or if you want to go into a nonfiction space. And if you do decide that you want to do either or, you can definitely decide also if you need to write under a pseudonym as well. So these are things that would protect you, protect your brand. But if you are providing insight that stands you up as an actual expert in a space that your business or brand is actually grounded in, then you want to go ahead and write under your actual name for sure. So hopefully we've got that down packed. So we're good. So, and let me please stop you guys right here. If you have not gotten out a pen and paper yet, you know this is the time where you need to go ahead, press pause, get your writing utensils together, get yourself some paper, because this is definitely class time and you're going to be definitely taking some notes. All right. Let me adjust my chair so I can get comfy as I drop these gems. Whew. All right. Let me not creak too much in my chair, but let me at least get comfortable as we sit back and talk a little bit about what it is that you need to do when creating your story. The first thing we're going to tackle is what the flow should be like, because every author should really start not with just this like blank piece of paper. You know how like in movies you see this like person sitting at a typewriter or sitting at their laptops or looking at a screen, and you just see the cursor blinking and it's just blinking. Maybe they have a title, maybe they have like the first few words in the sentence, it was a cold and lonely night, and then you just kind of see the cursor just still blinking. I never go with the approach of just staring at a blank page. If I do stare at a blank page, it's the blank page of the first step of me kind of putting together my story, or putting together the framework of what I want to write about. And that is definitely what's called a storyboard. So within the storyboard, it really allows me to see a big picture view of what journey I want to take the reader on. So I'm just going to use a very, very super simple, rudimentary kind of example here. Let's say I want to take someone on the journey of making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And I want them to make the best peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I would say the best judged by my baby girl, with like no crust, cut into fours. Okay, so I really want to take them to that place. And so on the storyboard, I'm going to say, what is it that I want my learners to get out of this? I want them to get that I want them to be able to make this sandwich, and they'll need the utensils that they need, and how are they going to actually apply it? And then after they apply it, what are they going to do? And then after they, close the bread and they put it on the plate and they cut off the crust and they cut it into four, they're then going to present it to the person who wants to eat it. Maybe it's themselves, maybe it's somebody else, and then wait for the person to tell you this was a damn good peanut butter and jelly sandwich, right? So you really have to think from like just a high lens, just a high level view. What is it that you're going to share with your readers? What is it that you really want them to know? And then once you create your storyboard, you're going to flush it out with more meat. This gives you the structure so that you know what to actually write about. So I'm going to first tell you what you should think about from a flow perspective when you're writing fiction versus what you should think about when you're writing nonfiction. So for the flow for fiction, I actually got this model from www.writersonline.co.uk, because we believe in giving credit where credit is due. And here they have a really great way to how to structure a novel. So once again, this is for my fiction ladies. And once again, if you've been through something that's really traumatic, I'll say date rape, maybe it was something really traumatic between a friend, maybe abortion, how you were able to get through that, whatever you can think of, something where it's very, very personal. You're not really sure if you want folks to know. Maybe you want to write under a pseudonym. Maybe you want to make this fictional. Really think about that so that you know how to protect yourself, protect your space, protect your well-being, even if you're trying to write a story to help others. You may be at a place where you're comfortable sharing your story because you plan on going out and you plan on speaking about this. I don't know if I was reading a book. I cannot remember if I was reading a book or if this was actually really what happened. I feel like I was reading a book. I don't know. I don't read a lot of fiction books, but I feel like I was reading this, or maybe it was an episode on Law and Order. Listen, y'all, I can't remember, but I do recall there being this story of someone who was an author writing about their life in as a prostitute or as a call girl. And so writing about what they've been through, writing about all the things. So not only did they write under a pseudonym, but even the front person, like the actual person who would go out and speak, was just like a front person. It wasn't an actual individual. It was to protect the person who was actually doing all this work, who had this past life. So you really want to think about how you would protect yourself, you know, in those cases, if you are going for a fiction story that is about your life. Or maybe you just want to write some like really funny fiction around dating, of like, you know, our dating life period, and, you know, in the past. You can definitely do that in a fiction form. So fiction is a way to go. I guess I'm telling myself this because I tend to really lean more towards nonfiction in writing and in reading. But definitely, ladies, if you're out there and you really have this knack or this desire to write fiction, this is the flow you would want to follow. So the first thing you want to do is you really want to think about what's called your hook. And this is your starting point. Why are we here? So in your starting point, I want you to really think about ways when you have read books and how like the first few sentences or even the first few paragraphs, you were absolutely hooked because you could tell the story was going to be amazing. That is what you want to accomplish when you're writing the hook. You want to be able to hook your readers at this point, and you want to start building some structure around where the story is going, because then you want to go into what's called your plot turn one. And this is what sets your story into motion. So I want you to think about, you know, for me, one of my favorite shows, so if this was like a written piece of work, which I'm sure it was, you know, it was a screenplay before it became anything else. It starts off with like a woman having a romantic tryst, and, you know, the romantic tryst drops her off at her apartment, and what she realizes is that she's getting evicted. And so her clothes and her couch, her favorite love seat, all of those things are like on the front lawn. And she is like looking real lost. Of course, the romantic tryst is like not interested at all in saying, hey, you can move in with me, but just being like, oh, you all right? Like, call me later. And so, you know, the main character kind of sits there, calls up her best friends. They come and they kind of save her, but it's like immediately you're like, oh, she's funny because of the way that she's like reacting to this very, very stressful point in her life. But then at the same time, not only is it like, hey, is she funny, but you're hooked because you're trying to figure out like, how is she going to get out of this situation? How is she going to switch her life for the better? Because right now, homegirl seems lost. So when you think about that plot turn, you know, it is really early on, but you are at the point where it kind of sets the story in motion. I will say usually stories that take longer to get to the plot turn one is usually those stories where we say, whoo, it's really taken a long time to get this thing going. Now, sometimes we aren't saying that and the story's bad. We just realize, ooh, it had a really slow start. And that's usually the verbiage we use, right? We're like, oh, it had a slow start. So you really want to have perfect timing when you think about when you start with your hook, which is your starting point, versus when you then go into your plot turn one. Then you go into what's called a pinch point one. And this is where we introduce the tension, the antagonist. So in this place or in this space, once we're able to identify who or what is causing this particular tension, this situation, it's really important because now we're building all of this to really get to that climatic. I've been saying like wrong words for the past couple of weeks. I'm like now second guessing every word that comes out of my mouth. So I am going to stay away from words that I am just not sure of, that I should be sure of. And we're just going to jump in and just say regular words. There we go. So this should be the point where as you're building up your pinch point, one, you're really now coming to what we call the midpoint. And in that midpoint, this is where your character stops being reactive. So they stop kind of just being this person where they're reacting badly to situations, or, like how you just have this one character that you're just like, you wish they would just put their foot in their mouth, or you just wish they would just do something differently, or you wish they would take action. This is usually that midpoint where that character usually stops acting in the way that you wish they would stop acting. Like, they get it. It's like they've had a personal conversation with you, or they're getting some Jedi mind trick here. They understand this is where I need to move because Nicole really cares about the fact that I am not doing well in the situation. She keeps yelling at the TV screen. So this is where your character usually starts to act in the way that you are like, yes, because they are taking an active role in solving the story's central problem. So they are not being reactive. They are no longer a victim. They are taking an really active role in saying, I'm about to go ahead and really handle this problem. Then we go into pinch point 2, because of course we can never just have a moment where they just get it together and all is well. There's always a turn. There's always something that happens where we're just like, whoo, what's going on? So just to rehash what we just discussed, we started at the hook, which is the starting point. We then had moved on to plot turn 1, and that's where the events are really start to set that story in motion. So we really understand why we're here. We kind of get a gist for what this story is all about. And then there's a pinch point 1, and that's where we introduce the antagonist. This is where we start to see the tension in this person's life. What's the cause of the tension? Who's the cause of the tension? And then we move into the midpoint. And the midpoint really is where our character gets it, and they are now taking an active role in solving the story's central problem. But then we move to pinch point 2. And pinch point 2 is where we pile on the pressure, and it really looks as if all is lost. Oh my goodness, that is it. This is what's going to happen. I'll give another example. I'm trying not to say the names of the shows just in case you guys haven't seen it and you want to see it and I don't ruin it for you. But there's a really, really great series out right now, and there's this, really awesome Black female professor, and she basically let the love of her life move across the pond, or actually moved. I don't know if they moved to London or if I don't know. They moved somewhere far overseas. And so in that, the love of her life comes back. That's the tension, because she's like, holy crap, because this person has really, that was like her love, and she hasn't really dated since then. So seeing that person was really a problem. But then, she would see him and she wouldn't say anything. Finally, she just faces him head on. And not only does she speak to him, but she also just leans in and just kisses him, because you know what? That was her boo. And she's thinking maybe this is, the universe saying that she needs to be with that person. But then guess what happens? Another woman comes out, and that is when she is introduced to the what? Introduced to the fiance, because homeboy is engaged. So that would be probably like your pinch point 2. The first problem we thought was like, holy crap, the ex-boyfriend who she loved with all of her heart and was getting ready to make this whole life change for, moved, and he moved back home. And she's like, oh my goodness, because she never expected to see him back in this area or in her area. And then once she decides to adjust the situation, that's when we find out, oh my goodness, boo, too bad. I know you really love him. You want to give him kisses and all. He is all the way taken. And at that point, you kind of feel like, well, all is lost, right? Well, that's when the story moves into what's called plot turn 2. And this is where your character discovers the information they need to complete the action they decided on in the midpoint. And in this case, guess what this is? This is when, in the same story, she learns more information. She learns that he too actually was going to propose to her. That she, I don't know if she learns at this point. I don't know. The information I'm giving may be a little out of sequence, but you get the gist either way. This is where she learns that he actually still loves her as well. And so she has all this information where it really drives the last piece. And so this actually is what's called the resolution. It's the climax of the story where the character succeeds or fails, depending on the ending, and, you know, on what they set out to achieve. So that's usually for like series. It's like where we leave you off before we decide to then go to the next season. Or for your book, it's going to be, you know, where you leave off. If this is going to be a series for you of books, maybe this is where it leaves off for right now. But, you know, this has a really easy way to just pick up once you decide to maybe write another series or another episode, if you will, of your book, another, you know, so really decide, you know, how you want this thing to go when it comes to your awesome pieces of literature that you're getting ready to write. So that is the flow for fiction. Now for flowing for nonfiction, so if this is you, this I actually got from Lisa Nichols, and she calls this the V method. So I put a little Nicole spin on it, so I'm sure this isn't hers like exactly to the point, but very much so because she is inspiration for this particular model. And I learned this from her when she did a session on how to speak, like when you speak, how to become a motivational speaker. And this works extremely well when you are writing nonfiction books. So the first thing you want to do is you want to think about the hook as well. You want to ask yourself, why are we here and how did this thing all begin? I usually start off my books with a letter to the reader because there's something that I just feel that I need to say to the reader. And I'm so thankful because I feel like God really sets these ideas into my head of like who I'm writing to. And what's so interesting is that everyone who's read my books always felt like those letters were to them, because I always get a message from someone saying, okay, how did you know? Or, okay, this was so what I was going through at this time. Or, you know, I feel like you're so talking to me. It's so hard to read. Even for myself, I just read Rock Your Life Again, and it gave me the jolt I needed in my life because of the fact that I was so uncomfortable. I don't know. I was just so uncomfortable with where I was. I was just like really stuck. So I didn't even recognize myself as the author. It felt like I was reading someone else's body of work who was giving me everything I needed in that moment. And I felt like she was writing to me the whole time. And I know that sounds crazy because I'm talking about me in the third person, but like that is literally how I felt, like that I wasn't even me, like that I was not the person who wrote this book. So I'm really thankful for God kind of pouring into me when it comes to writing those hooks in the beginning of the book. So when you write in the beginning of your book, ask yourself, you know, what is your letter to your reader? What is it that you want them to know? Why are we here? And why is it ever important for them to stay glued into the story? Then as you're talking about why we are here, I want you to kind of start this journey of, you know, how did you get to the lowest point of your journey? So take us slow through it. And I don't mean like, you know, make it 6 chapters of how did we get here, but meaning take some time as you're building out this whole story of how did it all begin. So, you know, for me in Tribe, I really talked about me understanding the importance of my personal tribe. And as I was becoming this entrepreneur, having this really important understanding of, you know, who my people were in my space as I was becoming an entrepreneur and building prestige, and how I had to really appreciate those different relationships before we even talk about building community, because community really starts with who is in your village, who is in your tribe, personally, the moms, the aunties, the best friends, the childhood friends you had forever that also doubles as your play cousin. Like, these are all the people in your tribe that you really, if you don't have those relationships understood, valued, protected, how do you protect relationships of a tribe that's now your community that's tied to your brand? You couldn't get it right when it came to the personal stuff. So we kind of start there, and then I kind of take you to this journey of like when I realized I really had to focus on building a tribe for prestige and what that looked like. So and your lowest point doesn't have to be, because I was never at a point where like I was like homeless or, not having any clients because of blah, blah, blah. Like, no, but there was something in my life that made me realize that it's the breath of vitality of the Prestige Society comes through the sisterhood, comes through the membership organization. And there were some things in my life that happened that kind of pushed me to realizing this is why I have to focus on it. So I kind of take you through that, like that story of like how we started, how did we get here? Like how did we get to becoming the Prestige Society? Then what happened when I realized I had to really focus on my tribe? And then what steps did I take to come out of that? So whatever your story is, let the lowest point be your journey down memory lane as you share what brought you to that turning point. So how did you get to that lowest point? Once you write about that, then you're going to move into the turning point that's going to talk about the one thing that caused you to change. The one thing that said, oh, this right here is going to wake me up and really cause me to look at things differently. And then once you do that, then let's start talking about the steps to resolution. And this is usually based into a model that you've created for your brand. I would say the student loan doctor always talks about like, she has like a model that, because when she speaks, she always speaks like to this model of like, how do you get out of debt? What do you look, how do you take those steps to get out of debt, and what you should begin to think about? I always talk about the glow model whenever people work with me. And so like, how do you, work on that? So if I wanted to write a story or write a book on the glow model, this would be like how I would help women find their glow. So definitely, think about the models that you've built, think about what you share and what you teach, and then you can use those models to be your steps towards resolution. And then once you get to the resolution, this is where your story reaches its end. It's where all the steps that you had to take to help you find resolution, they're all completed. And at that point, you just want to ask yourself, are the readers finished on this journey, or are there steps missing? Because this is how you know if your story is complete or not. This is how you're able to kind of put that conclusion on there and tie it up. And what's always your North Star, everything that always keeps you anchored, is you always ask yourself, what do you want the reader to walk away knowing? Because that helps you gauge too how far down the rabbit hole you're going with descriptions, how far you're going into anecdotes, how far you're going into examples. And if you find that the color red of a t-shirt that a woman wore at Wegmans on a Tuesday afternoon is not really helping you to get closer to being able to help women, really find peace in their lives through meditation and yoga practices, then you find that like, okay, I need to leave that part out because now I'm going so far down the rabbit hole. So where some details can help build and build substance to a story, there's other details that can really heavily weigh a story down and really cause a reader to disengage from the text. So this would be our flow for nonfiction. And just to revisit those steps really fast, it is you want to have your hook. That's why we're here. Trip down memory lane, which takes you to your lowest point. Your turning point, which is that one thing that caused you to change. Then your steps to resolution, and then resolution. So this is something that I think that will really help you in storyboarding. And I really push that this is what you do first before you decide to even sit down at a computer to type. If you do anything, I usually tell people to create PowerPoint slides that gives each section of the model its own slide, and you just write out bullet points. And those bullet points then help you identify exactly like what's next, like what are some of the key topics that should be on this particular page or on these couple of chapters covering these particular areas. So definitely think about that when you are building your content for your story using storyboards. All right. Now, let's get into the nitty-gritty. Let's just assume you've done your PowerPoint, your storyboard, and now you're ready to start writing. You are ready to become the next Carrie Bradshaw. You're sitting at your laptop. You have a blank page in front of you, and you're like, now what? Well, I'll tell you. Now you're going to go ahead and you're going to type 700 words a day. 700 words a day will actually get you a 150-page book in 90 days. Believe it or not, a 150-page book in 90 days. Here's what I will tell you. Writing 700 words a day on any given random day is not hard. Writing 700 words a day every day for 90 days is hard because some days you're going to be on absolute fire and you're going to be able to write 1,000 words easy, 1,500 words without even batting an eye because there's just so much in you that you just are letting it pour out, right? Now, there's other days when you are just over it. You feel like you are drowning in a sea of words, or you just feel like, I just don't have anything to give to this particular topic. So if that's the case, give yourself grace and allow yourself some time to deal with any kind of block that you may have. But that's why you want to embrace those days where you go far beyond your 700 words, because it will act as a buffer for you. It will allow you to write your book. Now, I will say this. My first book I wrote in 90 days. The goal was that I was trying to write it in 60. Instead, I wrote it in 90. The second book, it took me 6 months because I really wanted to give myself the grace to just kind of not feel pressured to write quickly. But if you want to create a writing group with maybe a group of friends that also kind of want to write their stories, try the 90 days first as a way to hold you accountable. And then if you find that you want to kind of give yourself some grace and give yourself an extension, do so unapologetically, as long as you know you're not putting it on the back burner because you are delaying something or you're procrastinating in writing the story. As long as you know that there's forward progression, then give yourself extension, no worries. But if you feel that you're just procrastinating, force yourself to write that book in 90 days. Force yourself to do it because there's something behind the procrastination. And at the end of the day, once you've finished your manuscript, you just finished the one part of this entire process. So write it, get it all out. And then if you just want to sit on it, give yourself something an anchored amount of time of like what that looks like. Like I want to give myself 2 weeks after writing my manuscript to kind of just like unplug before I go and deal with an editor. Or I want to deal with an editor, but I want them to take 2 weeks to read it. So, and I want to give them a 2-week deadline because I need 2 weeks to kind of like just completely unplug from that whole body of work. So whatever the case may be, you know yourself, you know your strengths, you know your weaknesses. Just be mindful, and whatever you do, anchor your expectations in dates. Without it, you will wait a year without having anything done, and you don't want that. All right, so far we talked about storyboarding and we talked about your writing schedule. So what did we say? 700 words a day will allow you to write a 150 page book within a 90-day period. So next, I would say the things you really want to consider would be figuring out what you want to do for cover design, definitely identifying what you want to do with an editor, and then choosing your self-publishing company wisely. So let's get right into it. When it comes to cover design, I always say you can either DIY or you can outsource. If you are a graphic designer, if you are extremely artistic, if you have done, your graphics in the past and received, like really great feedback, then go for it. DIY your heart out. I will say I DIY'd my first book. I hated my first book. Probably why I didn't really push Rock Your Life. I love the content in there, but I didn't push it because at that time, KDP was CreateSpace, and I just felt CreateSpace did like a poor job in printing. Like everything always looked pixelated. So since they've become KDP, they are much better, but I still hated the graphic design that I created because I was really new to Canva at the time. I was really new to graphic design. So it was just really like stupid. I think I had like splatters of like gold glitter paint all over with me in like a power stance pose. Like you look at your girl and whoo, baby, it was just definitely, I would say, needless to say, we have a new cover. So, and that's the beauty of it too. Like whatever cover you choose today, you can always go ahead, republish with new cover with, an addendum or an addendum, Lord, or an amendment to your interior files, so that you can add information, change information because time goes on. These books live. But we as authors evolve as people. We evolve in how we think. We evolve in information that we receive due to experiences. So if you're writing a nonfiction book, there's maybe some evolving that takes place in who you are and how you think. And you may want to capture that. And the beauty of having, different editions in your book, is that you can just say like, this is the second edition, and the second edition includes blah, 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 blah. And you can make those changes to your interior file without even batting an eye. So don't feel so bad about that. But definitely think about your cover. Think about what you want the design to be. Look at people who are in your field and look at designs to give yourself some inspiration. You can either go to Fiverr and get someone to do it for you, or, I'm sorry, I just saw a shadow go through the curtains and it scared the crap out of me. It was just the mailman. So we're good. We're safe. No one's coming to murder me. Oh my goodness, that was the scariest thing, guys. You guys know I watch way too much true crime, everything. True crime podcast, documentaries based on true crime. So yes, that definitely had me a little scared. All right. So, definitely think about, you can look at some of your competitors or your peers, I should say, within your field and see how you feel about just about their work and like what kind of inspiration you would want for your cover. So definitely feel free to do that. Now, when it comes to editing, definitely hire a pro. Listen, I love the person who did my first one, but they weren't an editor, number one. That's not their number one job, nor did they claim to be an editor. I did not know how much it would cost me to even hire an editor. So I thought the amount that I paid for my friend to do it was like me like paying far less than how much an editor would have been. When in fact, my friend charged me the same price as this editor that I found. And it wasn't that my friend was high priced. My friend only charged me $150 for a 150 page book. And the editor charged me $150 to do a 150 page book. So I will say that, and in that, people who do this for a living, like they are editors, they know how to edit a manuscript. I went on to Fiverr. I found a beautiful, black girl who looks just like me. I thought that because the book is written really informally, I write it as if I speak. So I needed someone who could relate to my voice, and relate to some of the things that I was saying and how I was saying it. So it was really important that I picked someone who kind of looked like me. And even in that, there were certain things I'm sure grammatically she wanted to change that I did not decide to take on for a change, because I really wanted to be in a space where I wanted the voice to sound like me, like authentically me. So I was okay with like not taking on some of those changes when we were looking at the red lines for the manuscript. But definitely hire a pro. You need a set of fresh eyes. If you ever try to go through like Friends to look through it grammatically, please just pick someone who is going to be really thorough if that's the route you're going to go. Because I have seen situations where people have used Friends and it's been very successful for them, but you have to also know who you're choosing. Because I did try to choose my friend again for the second book, and she kindly was like, nope, we are getting you a professional. So I appreciate her for that, and I definitely got myself a professional. And I will say the confidence I had in pushing the second book out was definitely higher than the first, only because, once again, we try to hire people to do things that are within our comfort zone, but maybe that's not really, what they should be doing. I mean, we do that all the time in our businesses, which is what we try to say do not do. So the fact that I was like, no, I want you to do it again, she was like, girl, no, we are getting you an editor. And when I found out the editor cost about the same amount as my friend, I was just like, look at there. She was so right, and I should have gone to an editor the whole time. So I want to definitely share, because I feel like most of us, need to share our experiences and also share some of the failures that we've had, or not failures, but some of the lessons we've learned, so that way others don't have to make that same mistake. But like I said, I do have friends, like right now, I have a friend who went through her husband's book, and she like sat down with the manuscript. She went over it twice. So, and in two different sittings, but like designated time to like look through the entire manuscript. And she is very meticulous. So, that's a situation in a partnership that really worked, because there were two bodies sitting down dedicated to just going over the manuscript without any disruptions or distractions. That's really, if someone can give you that kind of time, that's offering to edit your manuscript, that's the kind of person or professional you will want to bring on to a project like that. Moving on to self-publishing companies, guys, I want you to choose wisely. So here's the thing. KDP is probably the most popular, because KDP used to be CreateSpace, and it's an Amazon company. So in this, you have global distribution. They've just upgraded, so they have what's called a beta offering, and the beta offering means that you can now get, they have an offering that's in beta mode, which means they're testing it. So that is, you can either get your book in paperback, or, you ready? Drum roll, please. You can also get it in hardback, which is huge, because currently all of my back books or hardcover books, they are all through another self-publishing company, and all my paperback books are all through KDP. So if it could just be a one-stop shop, it would make my life so much better. So super excited about that. Wanted to share that with you guys. But definitely look, you got to do your research. Some self-publishing companies cost a fee for you to be part of their self-publishing company. Some self-publishing companies require that you buy your copies in bulk. With KDP, you only need to buy on demand. It is very, very feasible. You also have access to global distribution. So that means that your stuff will be on anything from Amazon to Barnes and Noble's online, you name it, it's there. So definitely take that into consideration. And we're like moving right along. The next thing I really want to talk to you guys about is once you've decided who you're going to self-publish through, I really want you to take a lot of time to think about how you're going to look at your sales. So you have the ability to do either indirect or direct sales. If you do indirect, what you're going to receive is a commission. Look at that very closely. When you are finished uploading your book into whatever self-publishing company you decide to go with, they will ask you to set a price. They will give you a suggestion 9 times out of 10 for what the minimum should be for your book. But then they're going to show you, based on that set price, what your commission will be if sold on those platforms. So if it's on Amazon, maybe if your book is $20, you get $3. If it's on Lulu or Ingram Spark or you name it, BookBaby, it'll tell you what your commission is. So most people really love to do indirect sales because to say you're on another platform, it looks amazing. To say, buy my book now on Amazon sounds really great. But here's the dollars and cents of it all. If you actually purchase your copies and send out your copies yourself or do print on demand, you actually can make more return on your investment. So let's do some math, shall we? Okay. If it costs you $2.13, which it normally does for about a 150-page black and white book, that's about 6 by 9 in dimension, then what happens is that you take the $2.13 plus the cost of shipping and you subtract that from the price of the book, which is $20. That means you could, let's just say the total price of all of that is anywhere from like $6 to $8. So now, instead of you making $20, you've made like anywhere from $14 to $12 per book. So that means you can either make $12 or $14 per book, or you can make $3 per book. If I sell 10 books, I can make $120 or $140, or I can sell 10 books on Amazon and make $30. You see what I'm getting at? So I really want you guys to think about, do you want to be just a highlight reel or do you want to be real? Like, think about it. Like, do you want to be a highlight reel and just be like, look at me, I'm on Amazon? Or do you want to be really making money based off of your sales on your book? Because, what are we doing this for? Are we doing this to impact lives? Or are we doing this to front? Right? So that's something I want you guys to really think about when it comes to indirect versus direct sales. Now, I know I talked about what happens beyond your e-commerce, which means what happens beyond you just selling your books online. Well, what happens is that people are going to ask for you to come and speak. They're going to ask for you to share every time. And listen, this is a great way for you as well to also barter. So if someone says, hey, I would love for you to come speak at my event, and let's say the event is like an expo that's happening, and you may have an honorarium, and let's just say their budget for the event is extremely low and it's not enough to satisfy your honorarium. Well, no worries. Then you say, okay, how about you give me a table? Because guess what, y'all? Vending tables cost money. Vendors pay lots of money to vend. So this way you say, okay, give me an opportunity to speak. If you want me to speak, then give me an opportunity to then also vend my books, which is great. Because let me tell you something, y'all, everybody's an author. Everybody's an author. If you can set up an account on any self-publishing account anywhere, you can be an author. So you know what that means? Everybody and their mama can be an author. With that being said, because everyone's an author, we know that everyone's not great. Everyone's not good. So you know what ends up happening? What ends up happening is that people need to hear your story. People need to hear words coming out of your mouth. People need to hear how you think before they even decide they want to buy anything from you. So when you're in a space where you're speaking, this is free advertisement for your book. Wherever I go, if I'm speaking and I'm selling the book, I am sold out of my books. If I'm just selling books, there is nobody checking for me. Okay? So, I mean, they might walk over, they may look, but they're not like, ooh, I have to get this book. So definitely look at that as opportunities for you to barter. And then on top of that, I really also want you to look at opportunities to then market yourself as a speaker. Because you have this book that talks about these topics, write down what those topics are. Use that on your one sheet. If you do not have a one sheet, we will save that for another day and another time. And then you can tell people like, these are the things we can talk to. And then that makes you so much more of a asset really to their event. So they'll want to have you as a speaker. So that is really all I have to share with you fabulous ladies who want to start writing your book and writing your story. I will say this, if you're really going to get serious about this, the next steps you really should take is one, set aside an hour a day. This way you can have this as like, this is your time to write. If you don't set it in your calendar, you'll never do it. So make sure you actually use a planner so that way you're tracking your 700 word count per day. And then start doing your research. So figure out, who you're going to use for an editor, figure out what you want to use for a cover design, figure out which self-publishing companies you really want to go with. And then whatever you do not get discouraged. I will say writing a book is not easy. It should be one of those things you like that you just find joy in doing if you do decide to do it. But I won't say it's easy. There's moments where you will have writer's block. There's moments when you just feel like, oh my goodness, like, wait, I reread this sentence and this paragraph 3,000 times. I am lost in the words. What is happening? Those are things that happen. But I will say that even though it's not easy, it is 110% doable. You can do this. And then if you need support, there's always coaching available around it. Be careful. Writing coaches usually cost in the thousands, and they usually make you do a slew of work that you could have done on your own. So make sure that you know the information about writing your story so that you don't get duped into spending thousands of dollars when there's some things you could have done on your own that you could have saved you some money. So whether it's you figuring out, you may just need a coach to kind of hold you accountable. Maybe you need a coach to kind of encourage you along the way. Whatever the case may be, definitely think about how you want to get help. Because if somebody puts in front of you something flashy, you just may fall for it if you don't do your research ahead of time, or if you don't know what to ask for in areas of help ahead of time. All right, ladies. So with that, I'm going to say have a wonderful, awesome, and most of all, blessed day. Bye.